I was playing a show this week. Partway through a song, my hand refused to play a chord. It just left a space. And the song came alive in that space in a way I hadn't discovered in any amount of practicing. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 11 of Daodejing. This podcast works through the 81 chapters of Daodejing, one at a time, not as history, not as philosophy to understand and set aside, but as a practice manual for living. No belief required, no doctrine, just what can be noticed, sat with, and verified in your own experience. You don't need to have heard the earlier episodes, just start here. Dao will meet you where you are. I write songs, acoustic guitar, singing, and I was playing a show. One of those nights where you're performing something for the first time since you changed it. I'd switched from strumming the chords to finger picking it. Different hand shape, different feel. More interesting guitar part. I've been practicing the new version in my studio for a while, but I always get a little bit nervous before I perform. Part of what I try to do is play each song like it might be the last time I ever play it. That's not dramatic, it's just the quality of attention I want to bring. The song was going along exactly as I'd practiced it, every chord where I'd put it, finger picking pattern clean, and then right before the chorus, the last chord and the progression leading in, my hand just decided not to play it. It left a space. I didn't plan that. I had not worked that out in the studio. I had never tried it. And in the space where that chord was supposed to be, the vocal melody had room to breathe. And when the chorus arrived after that gap, it arrived differently than it had ever arrived before. More alive, more itself. I stood there afterward thinking that the hand knew something I didn't know. Or maybe closer, the song knew something the arrangement didn't know, and found a moment of quiet enough hands to show me. Every time I'd practiced, I'd filled the space, every chord present, every beat accounted for, and what that song actually wanted, what brought the chorus to life, was the thing I'd been overfilling. That's Chapter 11. Here's my translation. I call it usefulness. 30 spokes around a single hub. Where there's nothing, there's the cart's use. Shape clay into a vessel. Where there's nothing, there's the vessel's use. Cut doors and windows to make a room. Where there's nothing, there's the room's use. So what is there acts as benefit. What isn't there acts as use. There's a few choices in this chapter worth naming. The title. I call this chapter Usefulness. Many translations call it the use of nothing, or something along those lines, pointing at emptiness as the answer. I kept it as the question the answer is actually asking. Yang, use. It appears 4 times, once for the cart, once for the vessel, once for the room, and once at the closing. The chapter isn't primarily about emptiness. It's about where use actually happens, and that's a different investigation. Then there's the middle lines. Dangqi Wu. Most translations render this as because of its emptiness, turning the relationship into cause and effect. The Chinese isn't doing that, though. Dang, it's a locative, at, in the place of, where. The line points to a location, not a reason. So where there's nothing keeps that. The cart's use isn't caused by emptiness. It happens in the empty place. And that's a different gesture. One is logic, the other is looking. Yo and Wu. These two characters are the paired terms the Daodejing returns to across the whole text. What's there and what isn't. Most translations of this chapter, yo, disappear in the middle lines. It folds it into useful or has usefulness. I kept it visible. The cart's use isn't just located in the hollow, it lives in the relationship between the spokes that are there and the hub that isn't. Both together, a relationship. The chapter's whole argument depends on keeping both in view. Then there's the closing couplet. 故有之以为理，无之以为用. Most translations flatten this into something like, existence has its advantages, but non-existence makes things useful. I went with, what is there acts as benefit, what isn't there acts as use. So li is benefit, what you get, advantage. Yong is the functioning itself. The chapter is making a precise distinction. What's there gives you the advantage, the material, the form. What isn't there does the actual work. Both are necessary. Neither alone does what the pairing does, what the relationship does. One more. The three examples are progressive, and the progression matters. A cart hub, a clay vessel, a room with doors and windows. Each is larger than the last, and each brings the hollow closer to where you actually live. The hub is distant. You sit on the cart. You don't enter the hub. The vessel is closer. You drink from it. The room, you live inside. By the third example, you're in the hollow. The chapter walks you into it. That's the setup. The chapter is teaching you to notice something you're inside of right now. The guitar story is one version of it. Here's another. In taiji, there's a principle called song. It's usually translated as release or sometimes to relax. They're both English words undersell the meaning. Song is what happens when you let go of unnecessary tension throughout the body and throughout the structure of a movement. It's not collapse, it's release. And the difference matters. When I first came to internal martial arts, I thought power came from doing more, engaging more muscles, adding more intention, more focus, gripping the ground harder. That's not wrong. Effort produces something, but it produces a specific kind of power, and it's a very limited kind, the kind that tires you out, the kind that meets resistance head on, the kind where you and the force you're trying to generate are working against each other as much as with each other. Song is the other direction. You stop adding. You release the tensions that were fighting each other inside the movement. And what happens, if you've done it right, is that power comes through you rather than out of you. The body becomes a channel rather than an engine. And you can't do that while you're filling every inch of the movement with intention. You have to leave space. Space inside the shoulder, space inside the hip, space inside the frame of the movement itself. And it's in those spaces that the force actually travels. This is chapter 11 in the body. The spokes of the movement are the muscles and bones and alignments. The hub is the hollow that makes the transmission possible. You can have perfect structure and no power if the hollow isn't there. And you can have less than perfect structure and significant power if the release is clean, because the force has somewhere to go. Zhuangzi tells a story about this from a different angle. A carpenter named Shi is walking through the country with his apprentice. They come across an enormous oak, ancient, huge, the kind of tree that would have been cut down centuries ago if anyone had found it useful. The apprentice is amazed. The carpenter doesn't even look at it. Later, the apprentice asks, "Why did you ignore that tree?" And the carpenter says, "It's worthless. If you try to make a boat out of its wood, the boat sinks. If you try to make a coffin, it rots too fast. If you try to make furniture, it falls apart. Everything about that tree makes it useless for building. And that's why it's still alive. If it had been useful, it would have been cut down long ago." That night, the tree appears to the carpenter in a dream. It says, "You're comparing me to fruit trees, pear trees, orange trees, useful trees. They're stripped when their fruit ripens. The branches are torn, the bark is split. The usefulness is what makes their lives miserable and short. I've been working at being useless for a long time. Now finally, I'm large and old and alive, and my uselessness is my great usefulness." Then the tree says with some irritation, "Would a truly useless creature like you understand this?" Zhuangzi is doing the same move chapter 11 is doing, but he's doing it louder. The carpenter evaluated the tree the way we all evaluate things, by what they produce, by what they contain, what you can do with them. And the tree is showing him that the whole frame is confused. What looks like uselessness from one angle is the very condition that allowed the tree to become what it is. The ordinary evaluation is reliably wrong in the same direction every time. Always overvaluing the filled thing, always undervaluing the hollow. Which brings me to the psychotherapy room. When I first started practicing psychotherapy, I thought helping someone meant having the right thing to say, the right interpretation, the right reflection, the right intervention at the right moment. Many times I filled the room with intention. I was trying to be useful, but I was full of training, full of considered responses. What I've learned over years of practice is that useful moments are almost always the empty ones, not absent ones, attentive ones. Moments where I'm present but not reaching, where the client says something and instead of responding, I let the thing they said continue to be in the room. Where the next thing they say comes out of that space rather than out of my response. People don't heal in my interventions. They heal in the silences that follow something true. The silence is where the material has room to settle or to deepen or to connect to whatever else it's connected to. The moment I filled that silence, I've taken the room away from the process. The room was the useful part. This is hard for beginning therapists to trust. You feel like you're not doing your job or you're not producing something, but the thing you're producing, the filled space, is in the way of the thing that actually needs to happen. The hollow is the treatment. And this is where the neye comes in. The neye says, hold stillness and things will reveal themselves. Don't work the interior. Don't strategize the settling. Just stop adding turbulence and the water clears on its own. Jing, the refined vital essence, accumulates not through effort, but through the reduction of what was dispersing it. The practice is subtractive. The chapter is saying the same thing the neye says, but through images. The cart doesn't need you to fill the hub. The vessel doesn't need you to fill the hollow. The room doesn't need you to fill the space inside the walls. And the self doesn't need you to fill every silence with commentary or performance or managed presence. What you're adding is often what's in the way. Let me point at this in one more place, because I think it clarifies something that's easy to miss. There's a way of reading this chapter that makes it sound like emptiness is the answer and form is the obstacle. That the hollow is where the real living happens, and the material is just scaffolding. That's not what the chapter says. The chapter is very careful. It names both. The spokes are necessary. The clay is necessary. The walls are necessary. Without the form, there's no hollow to locate the use in. The hollow isn't free-floating. It's always the hollow of something. What is there acts as benefit. What isn't there acts as use. Both. The chapter is teaching relationship, not preference. The mistake isn't choosing form over emptiness. That's the everyday mistake most of us make. But the opposite mistake is just as possible. Chasing emptiness as if it's the real thing and form is the illusion. That's the mistake that many translations make in chapter 1, that desire is bad and emptiness is good. The chapter doesn't go there. It keeps both in view. What that means in practice is that the guitar chord I didn't play only worked because of every chord I did play. The silence landed because the progression had built up to it. An empty bar of music in a song with no other structure isn't a pregnant pause. It's nothing. The hollow needs the form, and the form needs the hollow, or it's just noise packed into a shape. You feel this in conversations. A silence in the middle of a rich, developing exchange is alive. It has everything that came before inside it. A silence at the beginning of a conversation with a stranger is just awkward. Same silence, different container. The container is the form. The aliveness is the hollow. Neither works alone. So when I notice myself filling a space in a song, in a conversation, in a therapy session, in a day, the question isn't, should I stop filling? The question is, what's the space doing if I let it do it? Sometimes the answer is yes, fill it. The space needs material right now. Sometimes the answer is leave it. The space is doing its own work. The attunement is what Chapter 11 is training. Not a rule, a capacity to feel where use is happening and then not interfere with it. The hand that didn't play the chord wasn't being clever. It was attuned. Something in the music, maybe something in the room that night, maybe something in the accumulation of how the song had been developing inside me since I changed it, registered that the chord would cover over what wanted to come next. And the hand listened. I didn't. The hand did. That's Wu Wei, weightless action. Not non-action. Action that comes without being forced. The chord wasn't missing. It was absent. And there's a difference. The hub makes the wheel turn. Not the spokes, not the rim, the hollow. You can stop filling the space. Something is already there. San Shi Fu, Gong Yi Gu, Dang Qi Wu, You Che Zhi Yong, Shan Zhi Yi Wei Qi, Dang Qi Wu, You Qi Zhi Yong, Zhao Hu You, Yi Wei Shi, Dang Qi Wu, You Shi Zhi Yong, Gu, 有之以为利，无之以为用。